and very, very important to the Republican Party.
The former president previously said he supports leaving abortion laws up to the states and that he supports a 15-week abortion limit. Polls show immigration remains a top issue with voters ahead of next week's CNN presidential debate, and they're not happy with President Biden's handling of it. Fox's Madeline Rivera has more from the White House.
We expect former President Trump to hit President Biden on immigration. It is one of his biggest political vulnerabilities. This Fox News poll is showing 53% of registered voters think former President Trump does a better job on immigration than President Biden. That is despite that executive order that President Biden issued earlier this month, restricting asylum at the southern border. A majority of voters, though, nearly 6 in 10, support the action. And just this week, the president unveiled another executive action, making it easier for migrants married to U.S. citizens to get legal status. The president has continually put the blame on Congress for the crisis at the southern border, despite many voters putting the blame on him.
The president's border policy is coming under more scrutiny after a string of alleged migrant crime in the U.S. That debate on Thursday. David Dupap is serving time in federal prison for attacking former Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband with a hammer. He could get life in prison after his conviction on state charges yesterday in California. Sentencing has yet to be scheduled. America's listening to Fox News.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now. From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor and editor of the Transom.com daily newsletter, and I'm inviting you to join a conversation every week with the smartest thinkers out there about the issues Americans face and where we're going as a nation. This show will feature deep dive interviews with newsmakers and some of your favorite Fox News analysts. I hope you'll join me as we dive into the fray. It's the Ben Domenech Podcast.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you download podcasts.
93 WIBC Mobile News. On the level, on the go.
A killer has died in prison. It's currently 93 degrees on Monument Circle. I'm Wes Woodward, and here's what's trending at 5:03. Joshua Wade was a convicted serial killer from Alaska who had been serving time in Indiana. Sasha Nixon reports that the Department of Correction now says he is dead.
Wade ultimately said he had killed 2 men in 1994 and 1999, respectively. A man and a woman on the same night in 2000 and another woman in 2007. He was moved to the Hoosier State in 2014 as part of a plea deal. But officers say the 44-year-old was found unresponsive in his cell at the Indiana State Prison on Friday, June 14th. It is not yet clear what led to his death. Sasha Nixon, 93, WIBC Mobile News.
The judge in the Delphi murders case has scheduled another hearing. Harrison Silcox has the story.
Special Judge Fran Gall scheduled the 3-day hearing to start July 30th on Friday. Request from the defense over moving suspect Richard Allen from a state prison to a county jail and a motion to discuss Allen's charges will both be heard. Another request, this one from the prosecution, will be heard by Judge Gall to limit how much evidence and how many witnesses are allowed to be presented by the defense once this whole thing goes to trial in October. Harrison Silcox, 93 WIBC Mobile News.
Your Indiana Fever picked up their 4th straight win against the Atlanta Dream Friday evening, 91-79. Caitlin Clark, 16 points, 7 assists. With more than 17,000 people in the stands, Atlanta set a franchise record for single-game home attendance. Indiana back in action Sunday evening at Chicago. Here's your forecast from the American Standard Cooling Weather Center.
For today, partly cloudy, uncomfortable humidity, high temperatures in the low to mid-90s. Tonight, partly cloudy start, a line of showers and storms in the early morning, lows in the mid-70s. I'm Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Ryan Morse for 93 WIBC.
I'm Wes Woodward, on the level, on the go, and on WIBC.com.
It's the first day of the first grade, and she found a new best friend. It's a laid-back Sunday afternoon you wish would never end.
The homemade taste of Bluebell and good friends gathered round. The
good old days are being made right now.
Bluebell is known for flavors that push the boundaries of taste. Our oatmeal cream pie ice cream is an oatmeal-flavored ice cream with hints of brown sugar mixed with soft oatmeal cookies and a vanilla icing swirl. We've set the bar sky high for deliciousness.
The good old days are being made right now. The good old days are being made right now.
Look for Bluebell ice cream at your local grocer and pick up your favorite flavor today.
It's JMV. The July 4th sale is on at Miss M's Home and Garden in Bargersville. 20% off patio furniture, trees, and shrubs through July the 3rd. State Road 135 south of Whiteland Road.
Through their service, veterans have our backs. Now we should have theirs. Learn more at gotyoursix.org.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is the Second Amendment, and this is the Gun Guy.
Boom, 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 boom. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, 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 boom. Bang, bang, bang.
With Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And good afternoon, and welcome to the Gun Guy Show here on 93 WIBC. We're thrilled you're with us. A lot to talk about, as we always have here on the Gun Guy Show, particularly today, because we just had a very significant ruling from the United States Supreme Court that will affect, no question, will affect how Second Amendment cases are analyzed going forward. And listen, there's a lot of discussion about this case out there. A lot of people are expressing opinions on social media. A lot of people are expressing opinions who clearly haven't read the decision. But I have. It's a long decision if you want to get through all the concurring and dissenting opinions. For instance, the majority opinion written by Chief Justice Roberts, it was only, I think, 17, 18 pages. It's really not very long. But Clarence Thomas wrote a very long, much longer than the majority opinion, a very long dissent. And then there were separate concurring opinions, one from Justice Gorsuch and another from Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Then you had concurring opinions, but from some of the liberal justices, including Justice Sotomayor and our newest judge on the Supreme Court, Justice Jackson, who were basically whining about the steps forward the court has made on the Second Amendment, even in the context of agreeing with a case that a lot of us are seeing as a step backward in terms of protection of Second Amendment rights. Now, how big of a step backward it is really where the discussion lies. There's no question it's a step backward. And there's no question that it will result in more gun control laws being held to be constitutional going forward than if the opinion were different. And specifically, if it had gone a different way on how the analysis works that courts are required to go through under Supreme Court precedent in determining whether a gun control law is constitutional or not. And it made it easier for courts to find that gun control laws are, in fact, constitutional. Does that mean that it really undid, if that's a word, that it unraveled the advancements we've made just recently, including in the Bruen decision from 2022? No, it certainly didn't undo that. It didn't eradicate the benefit that we derive from these earlier opinions. It just limited how they're going to be applied. But the bottom line, and there's no question, and if anybody wants to contest this, they're just wrong, that it will result in more gun control laws being found to be constitutional. It does not, and I'm seeing a lot of chatter on social media talking about due process issues, and they're saying, "Oh, they upheld this law, and there's no due process, and they ignored all the due process problems, and this is a huge problem. It's going to be a huge problem with red flag laws that lack due process, and now all those are going to be held to be constitutional." And the court ignored these obvious due process issues. Listen, let's just get one thing clear right up front before I get into the specifics of the case. The case did not address due process issues. And when we talk about due process, what are we talking about? We talk about the requirement in the Constitution. This is under both the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. The Fifth Amendment as to federal laws and regulations, the 14th Amendment applying those same protections to laws of the states. The due process is essentially consisted of those rights that you have before the government can take rights away from you or property away from you. They have to give you what's called due process, and there are certain requirements of due process. And among those are things like the right to counsel, the right to defend yourself, the right to appear in court, the right to confront witnesses against you, the right to produce your own exculpatory evidence in a criminal case. Exculpatory meaning the evidence that supports your innocence. To require witnesses to appear on your behalf through subpoena or otherwise, to obtain from the other side the information they're going to use against you. There are a number of due process protections required by the Fifth and 14th Amendments. And a lot of people are throwing their hands in the air and crying about due process with respect to the Rahimi decision. And listen, Rahimi, in this case, did not make any due process arguments. And the court notes that. It was purely a single issue, which is the law at issue in that case, which is the law that says if you're subject to a domestic violence order of protection, if you're the one who's had a domestic violence order of protection issued against you that protects some other person, an intimate partner, and protects them from being injured by you, assaulted by you, and the court finds a credible threat of physical injury, and on that basis issues the order after you had a hearing or the opportunity to request a hearing, the law says at that point you cannot possess a firearm. That's the law at issue in the Rahimi case. And Rahimi said that's not constitutional. That is a violation of the Second Amendment. The court came back and said, no, it's not a violation of the Second Amendment, and went through a broad analysis of why it's not. And only one justice, Clarence Thomas, disagreed with the majority opinion. It was an 8-1 decision. But in that context, and in the process of issuing its opinion, the court specifically says, in the opinion, Rahimi made no due process arguments. So we do not address any due process problems with this statute. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that during the show. Were there due process arguments to be made? I think there were. Now, listen, any appeal, and I do appellate work, and I've won cases here in the appellate courts of Indiana. And any appellate lawyer will tell you, you got to make a decision on what issues you want to raise. Part of that's based on what issues you've preserved in the lower courts, what arguments are available to you. But secondly, you don't want to dilute your strongest arguments by bringing other arguments that are not as strong. So every lawyer has to make the decision, the strategic call of what all arguments do I want to lead with, or do I want to even include? And you've got page limitations. You don't have an unlimited amount of room to make every argument under the sun. And you don't want to be perceived by whatever appellate court you're talking about, certainly by the Supreme Court of the United States, as just throwing every conceivable thing against the wall and just hoping something sticks. So these are judgment calls, strategic calls that have to be made. But in this case, make no mistake, and let's just put that aside right up front before we get into the opinion. It's not about due process. If you want to whine about due process, you're perfectly entitled. I whine about due process problems all the time. And I've specifically decided and discussed the due process problems in the context of the law here that was the subject of the Rahimi decision, which is being subject to a domestic violence order of protection means you've lost your Second Amendment rights. During the term of the order, not forever, and the orders don't last forever. But during the effective period of the order, you've lost your Second Amendment rights. Are there due process issues associated with that? Yes, and I'll get into those during the show. We're at the quarter hour. It's time to take a break. We want to take your questions and comments about the decision, and feel free to join the discussion, 317-239-9393, 317-239-9393. Why don't we get into the specifics of the decision? What's the case all about? Why did and listen, one thing I find annoying is listening to other people on the radio who 90% of the discussion is just want to tell you about how right they were about something or how they predicted something. And it's annoying. My thought on that is that if anybody's paying attention to what you have to say, they're going to know when you're right. You don't have to tell them. But having said that, why did I predict this exact result from the Supreme Court? And we'll get into all of that. And if you want to join the discussion, take your calls as well. 317-239-9393. We'll be right back. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Tony Katz.
Do they still do mail in Carmel?
Carmel, don't ever change.
I love the living statues that sit on the benches. They're awesome.
Yes, that's how people from Greenwood earn extra money. Oh, I'm going to get emails. What have I done? You know everybody here is just in debt and house poor up to their ass. Don't you laugh, Zionsville. You have it worse. $1.13 trillion of credit card debt. Half of that is on the west side of Carmel.
Tony Katz, mornings 6 to 9 on 93 WIBC and WIBC.com.
Guy Relford for Indiana Gun Club. You know, Indiana Gun Club is Indy's premier shotgun club. They're located in Fortville, right up by Geist. Very convenient from Indy, just minutes from Indianapolis. They've got over 2,000 guns in inventory. A lot of people don't understand what a high-end gun store they actually are. I've brought several guns there. My first Wilson Combat came from Indiana Gun Club. My first Ed Brown, 1911, came from Indiana Gun Club. One of my favorite places to buy pistols and rifles and shotguns for a lot of years. They're located on 150 acres. They've got trap, skeet, and my favorite, sporting clays. They've got 5-stand, which is also a lot of fun. They're open to the public. You don't have to be a member. You can show up. You can shoot sporting clays, trap, or skeet. They also host tournaments, registered shoots, different fun shoots, corporate fundraisers or bonding exercises, team building, client relations, even bachelor parties. And in fact, coming up in August, they've got their Pheasants Forever fundraiser. Hey, listen, if you're a hunter and you want to support Pheasants Forever, it's one of the great conservation groups out there. Check that out. You can go to Indiana Gun Club, just search for Pheasants Forever event. It's coming up Saturday, August 17th. You want to put a team together, you can register teams of 5. You can show up as an individual shooter. They'll take care of you. You can check all that out at Indiana Gun Club for the Pheasants Forever event. But check out my friends at Indiana Gun Club, my favorite place to shoot sporting clays. I've been shooting there for a long time. It's where I learned how to shoot sporting clays. They're located at 14926 East 113th Street. That's 14926 East 113th Street. Or just check them out at indianagunclub.com.
Close your eyes and picture it. The warm sun on your face. The sound of waves lapping against the shore. What if I told you that feeling of summer relaxation could be yours all year round? At Howard Bailey Financial, we specialize in retirement planning that lets you embrace that summer state of mind every day. Imagine knowing that your future is secure. With our expert advisors, we'll craft a personalized retirement plan tailored to your dreams. Whether it's traveling the world or pursuing your passions, we'll ensure that your retirement is as carefree and fulfilling as a relaxing summer afternoon. Embrace a summer state of mind and text SUMMER to 888-494-5004 to download our complimentary retirement toolkit and experience your retirement planning with confidence.
This endorsement was not provided by a client of Howard Bailey. This individual was compensated for this endorsement. For more information, visit howardbailey.com/TS1.
From marshmallow festivals to fireworks on the shore, no matter where you're headed this summer, Hubler's got you covered for 100,000 miles. During Hubler's Freedom to Drive, shop any of our 12 locations and choose from Chevys, Fords, GMCs, Buicks, Nissans, Acuras, Mazdas, Hondas, and many more. Over 2,000 vehicles. All makes, all models, certified vehicles, luxury vehicles, even the hard-to-find ones. Plus, every Hubler Q-certified vehicle is covered by a 128-point vehicle inspection and a free Carfax history report.
'Cause Hubler's got you covered.
No matter where you're headed this summer, Hubler's got you covered for 100,000 miles. During our Freedom to Drive, visit drivehubler.com or any of our 12 locations.
Cover me!
Warranty on select models less than 9 years old.
Hey, Pat Sullivan here, letting you know that when you need plumbing help, call who I call, my friends at Hope Plumbing. Not only are they experts in their field who respect the true value of customer service, they also love giving back to this community, which is evident in their referral program. If you refer a friend, Hope Plumbing will give you a $50 gift card to a local restaurant. Great plumbing and supporting local restaurants. What more could you ask for? Visit hopeplumbing.com or give them a call at 641-HOPE.
I think we can all agree. Over the last few years, things have gotten weird.
Weird, confusing, and at times, pretty scary.
And for our kids, these things can be overwhelmingly stressful.
And can increase the risk for mental health problems as they grow.
But there's so much hope.
Scientific research and real-life experience
tell us that the number one antidote to stress is authentic, trusted relationships.
So that's why I.
That's why we.
That's why I am committed to building and maintaining a trusted space.
For the students I influence every single day.
Until schools across the country
can proudly call ourselves a trusted space.
This is 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 a trusted space.
Access free films and resources to build trusted spaces in your schools and communities at atrustedspace.org.
Pierce Jewelers, Carmel's family-owned jewelry store, is dedicated to quality and fine craftsmanship. Let them help you celebrate that special moment in your life. Shop local, shop smart, shop Pierce Jewelers.
Find the path to recovery that works for you. Learn more at cdc.gov/stopoverdose.
Second to none on the Second Amendment. This is The Gun Guy with Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
So welcome back. I'm Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. So if you're just tuning in, I want to do a bit of a deep drill on this new decision out of the U.S. Supreme Court, U.S. versus Rahimi. And as I mentioned before the break, what the case involves is the issue of whether a particular federal statute is constitutional or not. And as the federal statute, by the way, I talk about this during my Essentials of Indiana gun law class that you hear me pitching here on the show all the time. And I often talk about this law. I talk about it in every one of those courses because it's important. It's important for people to know. One of the ways you can lose your Second Amendment rights, and one of those ways is if someone obtains a domestic violence order of protection against you. And someone who is a quote-unquote intimate partner, and that is a defined term in the statutes, but it includes wife, husband, spouse of whatever gender, someone with whom you've lived, someone with whom you've had a child, and beyond. But if an intimate partner seeks a protective order against you, and you're given the opportunity for a hearing. Now, very importantly, and I get this call all the time at my office. Somebody will call and be very upset because they've been denied a gun purchase or they've been denied a handgun license from the state police. And they'll say, I've never been convicted of a crime. There's no reason I should have been denied. And I start going through the list of reasons you can be denied, reasons you may have lost your Second Amendment rights. And one of them is, have you had any domestic issues? Well, yeah, if there has been a protective order issued against you. Well, I got something in the mail, and you know what? I didn't really want to see the person again. I didn't care if they issued whatever order they were talking about because, it said something about not, going to their workplace or going to their home or calling them or anything else. And I just said, fine. And so I didn't request a hearing. Well, if you had the opportunity for a hearing, and a lot of times the orders you get, their preliminary order called an ex parte order says if you want to contest the quote unquote permanent orders, not permanent, typically in Indiana they last for 2 years on their face. Unless they're withdrawn for some reason, terminated for some other reason, but typically they last for 2 years. They can be renewed if the person goes back and attempts to do so and does that successfully. But before the long-term order is issued, a lot of them say if you want a hearing, you have to request a hearing within X number of days. It's usually 30. If you don't request the hearing, that's the same as if you have the hearing and lose. You were afforded the opportunity for a hearing. And for those folks who are legitimately concerned about the issue of due process, that's an element of due process, which is you can request a hearing. So it isn't, you don't just lose your rights without the opportunity of going to court and being heard. I'm not defending these laws, but if we're going to fight the laws and if we're going to contest their constitutionality, we need to understand what the issues really are and what the laws really say. So yes, you have the opportunity for a hearing. If you're not given the opportunity for a hearing, if the order is granted, your rights are not restricted. You haven't lost your rights because there's a requirement that you were afforded the opportunity for a hearing before you lose your rights, before you lose your Second Amendment rights specifically, before you're a prohibited possessor, quote unquote. But also a requirement is the judge has to find that you're a credible threat to the person being protected. The judge has to find that. If the judge doesn't find that you're a credible threat of physical injury, a credible threat to the safety of the person being protected, then the law doesn't apply. So let's say you just harass someone with text messages too much, or you call them too often. And if you harass them in some way, can you get a protective order issued against you? Yes. But if there's no finding that you're actually a credible threat to the safety of the person, then the law doesn't apply. And again, do not take any of what I'm saying and say, oh, listen, Relford's defending these laws. No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. But I'm telling you what the law says and what it doesn't say. Because again, if we're going to fight these laws, we're going to contest them in court or otherwise, or we're going to go out and talk about them even on social media. Well, let's understand what they really say, what the requirements really are, because those issues bear directly on whether they're constitutional or not. So that's what the law says. Well, Rahimi had a domestic violence order of protection issued against him. And he said that's not constitutional. It's not constitutional because it violates his Second Amendment rights. He did not raise due process issues. He raised only the Second Amendment issue. He said it violates my Second Amendment right to bear arms. And the lower courts were sort of split on that. Originally, the trial court said, no, I'm not buying that claim. And originally, the Fifth Circuit said, no, we don't think this violates the Second Amendment. But then the Bruen case came out from the U.S. Supreme Court in 2022. And that changed the ballgame because the Bruen case, this is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. It changed the ballgame dramatically with respect to Second Amendment analysis by the courts because it changed the test. Because listen, all over the country, courts were applying this wacky balancing test. And it involved different levels of scrutiny that courts would use to assess constitutionality, and it considered how legitimate the state's interest was in passing a particular law, and it would balance that to some degree against the extent of intrusion, the extent of the violation on a person's Second Amendment rights. And the whole premise of this test was really offensive to me, and I was always upset about this test. And I whined about this at every opportunity because it specifically said, well, you know, some infringement of your Second Amendment right is okay if the government has a compelling enough interest. And to me, that flies in the face of what the Bill of Rights is all about. The Bill of Rights is telling the government to pound sand. The Bill of Rights is telling the government they just can't do certain things. And this balancing test essentially said, well, the government can, and a certain amount of infringement on your Second Amendment right is okay if there's this compelling state interest in doing so. And all the government's had to say with respect to gun control laws is, well, we're trying to keep people safe. We're trying to cut down on mass shootings and protect children. And of course, that's this incredibly compelling state interest. So whatever damn infringement of Second Amendment rights the law wants to infringe upon, courts would say that's just fine. And using that balancing test and this level of scrutiny, depending on the degree of infringement, and this balancing of the state's interest against the level of infringement, resulted in case after case after case where courts said, oh yeah, that law is constitutional. It does not violate the Second Amendment rights. And we're talking about assault weapon bans, high-capacity magazine bans, and you name it. So-called universal background checks. Wherever those were being contested, in most places, courts were finding them constitutional. Because under this balancing test, if a court wants to find the law constitutional, they can absolutely do so. I mean, they're not really hemmed in much at all. All they have to say is, oh, that's really a compelling state interest that the government's trying to protect. And, oh, the degree of infringement isn't all that bad. You don't need the most popular rifle in America because you can just go get some other gun to protect your home or to go hunting with. And so whatever level of infringement that involves is just fine. And that's exactly what happened all over the country. But Bruen in 2022 changed all that. And it changed all that dramatically for the better. Dramatically for the better. We're a little past the bottom of the hour. We come back, I'll tell you why and how it so much changed the ball game. And why, as a lot of us predicted, and I predicted all along, as soon as the Bruen case came out, I said, oh, there's a lot of gun control laws that are in a lot of trouble. And yes, we've seen laws fall left and right all across the country, and some of them are winding up in front of the Supreme Court, just like in the Rahimi case, using this new analysis that comes out of the Bruen decision in 2022. And when we come back, I'll go into how that decision affected where we ended up and how the Rahimi case got to the Supreme Court of the United States and how the Supreme Court now has tweaked that test. It didn't back up from the test. Both dissenting opinions, Sotomayor and Justice Jackson, both of those justices basically were making arguments for why the test created by Bruen that got away from this ridiculous balancing test that was used to support, in my mind, unconstitutional gun control laws all across the country. That basically these justices were saying why we ought to go back to that. The court did not do that. They upheld the new test, which I'll go into after the break, but they tweaked it to some degree, and they tweaked it in a way that is unquestionably going to result in more gun control laws being found to be constitutional. And I'll tell you why and how they got to that result, and why I think 8 justices sided with the idea that we ought to roll back a little bit on the effect of the Bruen decision. And I'll talk exactly about what that means here when we come back. Right now, we're taking a break. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Kendall and Casey.
Okay, so you ever go into Cracker Barrel and think,
who are the old-timey photos? That's a great question. They're just a stock of some Cracker Barrel warehouse where it's like, we have 93 photos of Maud from Santa Fe, New Mexico, sitting on a porch.
Right, store 78 needs something in the left wing. Ship it out.
Kendall and Casey, weekdays 9 till noon on 93 WIBC and WIBC.com.
Parsons Transportation Group, Inc. has an opening for Engineer 2 in Indianapolis, Indiana, to independently develop and review the creation of bridge and structural engineering design which meet customer quality requirements, including defining the problem, establishing the work scope, preparing the budget and schedule, planning the work, providing technical direction, and reporting the work status. Professional engineer's license required. Apply online at jobs.parsons.com. Must reference job number 11863.401.7/R154666.
Terry Stacy here. Honey Baked Ham isn't just for the holidays. Stop in for lunch and choose from handcrafted sandwiches, salads, soups, and more. Or take home a heat and serve family meal that comes with a home-style main dish, sides, and rolls. Perfect for busy weekend nights and better than fast food. Have a special event this summer? Let Honey Baked cater with sandwich trays or a VIP buffet with all the extras. Honey Baked on West 96th Street in Indy or Greyhound Pass in Carmel makes it easy to serve something special any day of the year.
Hey, it's Big Joe for your trusted local independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer, Kirby Heating and Air Conditioning. Owner Robert Kirby reminds us of the homeowner's responsibility in protecting their heating and air conditioning investment.
Keeping the product clean is going to help out with your efficiency. That's filters, cleaning the outdoor equipment, even maintenance on the gas furnace. We recommend the gas furnace be cleaned every year. And it's going to help with the longevity of the equipment also. We want that equipment to last as long as possible.
Go to KirbyHeating.com for help. Kirby Heating and Air Conditioning is your trusted local independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Hour on WIBC, powered by Pierce Jewelers, Carmel's Diamond Engagement Ring Store.
Fox News, I'm Roger Stern. More than 100 million people are under heat alerts or advisories in the Northeast and Southwest. And don't forget about the pets. Veterinarian Dr. Lisa Lippman telling Fox Weather that dogs can get heat stroke and the signs are subtle.
Pets may just slow down. They don't want to walk. You may see them panting excessively, especially with a flat tongue.
President Biden's busy prepping for Thursday's debate against Donald Trump, which could change the course of the election.
The president's former chief of staff, Ron Klain, is leading the debate prep. His personal attorney, Bob Bauer, is suspected to be playing the stand-in for Trump and mock sessions.
Fox's Madeline Rivera. Biden needs to show he has the vigor and mental acuity to do the job. America is listening to Fox News.
If you're looking for a deal that cannot be beat, get over to the friendliest folks you'll ever meet. Hey, it rhymed. Andy Moore Ford. The commercial truck center is currently undergoing big changes, which means bigger and better things for you coming soon. Stop by today, right there on Main Street in Plainfield, and get more savings, more selection, and more for your trade only at Andy Moore Ford. You're going to love it, and you'll see why other drivers love it too. You're ready to go electric vehicle? Andy Moore Ford is the EV headquarters. Check out the Mustang Mach-E, the E-Transit, and that F-150 Lightning, all in stock with more arriving daily. And say hello to more rebates, federal and state incentives. You could save more on your EV purchase. Plus, with updated federal regulations, you can claim up to $7,500 instantly on site. We're talking about saving more with Andy Moore Ford. Your next car, your next truck. Talk to them about service as well and your electric vehicle. 2713 East Main Street in Plainfield or online at Andy Moore, M-O-H-R. AndyMooreFord.com.
Hey, this is Pastor Micah Beckwith.
And I'm Pastor Nathan Peternell.
And we serve at Life Church, and we got a podcast that we wanted to tell you about called Jesus, Sex, and Politics.
Yeah, you know all those things that the culture doesn't want to talk about that will scare you? Yeah, that's our bread and butter. We love it.
We're going to equip you on how to defend conservative constitutional values based in God's Word in this podcast. So tune in to Jesus, Sex, and Politics.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
Over the last few years, things have gotten weird.
And for our kids, these things can be overwhelmingly stressful.
Scientific research
and real-life experience tell us that the number one antidote to stress is authentic, trusted relationships.
So that's why I am committed to building and maintaining a trusted space.
This is a trusted space.
Access free films and resources to build trusted spaces in your schools and communities at atrustedspace.org.
The show about gun rights, gun safety, and responsible gun ownership. This is The Gun Guy with Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back. This is the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC with Guy Relford. That's me. So, in Rahimi, a lot of us, and me included, predicted this result in terms of the court finding that the statute in question is constitutional. If you're just joining the show, the statute says if you have a domestic violence order of protection issued against you, where a judge finds that you're a credible threat to an intimate partner and you're afforded the opportunity for a hearing, and you either have a hearing or you fail to ask for one, then you have just lost your Second Amendment rights. By operation of law, you can't possess a firearm. That's exactly what happened to Rahimi. He was convicted of violating that law because he had guns in his possession after the domestic violence order of protection was issued against him. And therefore was convicted under that statute. He contested its constitutionality. He raised his Second Amendment issues. And the courts originally, including the Fifth Circuit, which is the appellate court in Texas, in the federal system, originally said, no, we think the law is constitutional. But then the Bruen case came out. And that's what I was talking about before the break. And the Bruen case threw out this ridiculous balancing test the courts have been using all over the country to support gun control laws. And the Bruen case threw that out and said, no, to determine whether a law that regulates Second Amendment rights, a gun control law, to determine whether that's constitutional or not, you simply look to the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment to determine whether a particular law is constitutional or not. So what does that mean? Text, history, and tradition. Well, text is, what does the amendment say? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's not a miracle I remember that. I have it tattooed on my right arm. I have a cheat sheet right here on my arm. But you look at what it says first. That's the text. And what does it mean? And the Heller case from 2008 helps us a lot on what it means, because that was really the first meaningful Second Amendment case we had from the Supreme Court. It wasn't until 2008. And it resolved key questions about what the Second Amendment means and the rights it protects. And for instance, there had been a long-standing argument, and a lot of courts had bought into this. A lot of quote-unquote legal scholars had bought into this. And that is, since the Second Amendment starts off a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, that the right only applied if you were in a government-sponsored military group, a militia. Today, that would be the National Guard. And if you weren't in the National Guard today, the Second Amendment does nothing for you. It protects no rights. You have no rights under the Second Amendment, period. It is not an individual right protected by the Constitution and a right that possessed by individual citizens, members of the public in the United States. A long-standing argument. In the Heller decision in 2008, for the first time, Supreme Court rejected that argument. Now, it did so in a 5-4 decision. Consider that for a minute. By one vote, the Supreme Court preserved any right you have. If you're not in the National Guard, by one vote, the Supreme Court actually upheld your Second Amendment rights under the United States Constitution. One vote the other way. And the law of the land would be you and I as individuals, not members of the military, not members of the National Guard, have no rights under the Second Amendment. Huge. Couldn't have been bigger, and a lot of us were nervous as hell. We're nervous about what Justice Kennedy was going to do with that case. He was a swing vote. And then the Heller decision went on to talk about what arms are protected. It talked about bearable arms that are in common use for lawful purposes in the United States. Common use. And that, another huge decision that helps us dramatically. Common use for lawful purposes? Doesn't that sound to you like the most common rifles in America? Semi-automatic sporting rifles, you and I would call them, what a lot of gun control people want to call assault weapons, are clearly firearms in common use in the United States. The Heller decision says those are protected. And since the Heller case involved basically a complete ban on handguns in Washington, D.C., it found that specifically unconstitutional because, yes, handguns are in common use, obviously, for lawful purposes in the United States, including the defense of one's home, and personal protection outside the home. And so the Heller case gave us a lot of help in terms of what the Second Amendment means. And so the first part of the text, history, and tradition test really created, now it's something that Justice Kavanaugh actually talked a lot about during his confirmation hearings. If you watched all those and all the ridiculous focus on how much beer he drank in high school and college, and as much of a circus as that turned into when they were actually asking him some legitimate questions about his views on different issues, he talked a lot about text, history, and tradition, and he said that's the way the Constitution generally ought to be interpreted. And a lot of us loved that because it's focused first on what the hell the words say. And what did the founders mean? And it was so refreshing to hear, and he certainly followed that line of thinking while he's on the court. So text, history, and tradition. So text, we talked about. What the hell does it mean? What's history and tradition mean? We'll talk about each of those when we come back. We're taking a break. Give us a call, 317-239-9393, 317-239-9393. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Hammer and Nigel.
Alec Baldwin and his wife and their 7 kids are going to star in a new reality show on TLC.
Alec Baldwin, to this very day, has still killed more people than anybody that stormed into the United States Capitol on January 6th. That is a fact. And he's getting a reality show? It's disgusting.
Hammer and Nigel, weekdays 3 till 7 on 93 WIBC and WIBC.com.
Guy Relford for Tactical Firearms Training. Our most popular class is Essentials of Indiana Gun Law, and we've got another one of those coming up Saturday, August 17th. 9 a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. It's going to be at Indy Arms Company. We'd love to have you come out and join us. That's just 4.5 to 5 hours of the most important legal information you need as an Indiana gun owner, including a very detailed discussion of the justified use of force and self-defense, including deadly force, how you can avoid commonly prosecuted crimes like pointing a firearm, intimidation with a deadly weapon, and criminal recklessness with a deadly weapon, and a lot more. Where are all the places you're prohibited under state or federal law from possessing a firearm? And a heck of a lot more than that. It's $50 for an individual, $95 for couples. We'd love to have you there. We still have seats available, although this class always sells out. You can sign up right online. Go to tactical-firearms.com. Just click on upcoming courses at tactical-firearms.com.
To protect his family from disaster, Steve used his camera phone. Done. By taking pictures of his important documents, Steve can always have them stored online. Learn more simple disaster prep tips at ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
A house or business fire is something you never want to think of. But should it happen, think fast. Think Michelas. Over 35 years of rebuilding lives and spirits at the same time. No one comes more respected or as fast. Trust the ones the insurance companies trust. Water, storms, fire, and wet basements. Life happens. Michelas happens to help you through it. Call 844-FIX-INDY. Make it Michelas.
Indiana Pathways for Aging helps Hoosier Medicaid members age 60 and over get support at no additional cost to live life their way.
Mom's Parkinson's is progressing, and Pathways provides in-home support so she can be with family every day.
Pathways coordinates Medicaid and Medicare services. I'm getting help with meals, personal care, and transportation.
One day, I might choose a nursing home, but today, I have options with Pathways.
To learn more, eligible members call 87 Pathway 4 or visit in.gov/pathways.
Hey, this is Spencer Thompson at Thompson Furniture and Mattress in Columbus. Now through Monday, it's our inventory reduction sale. Take up to an extra 20% off the already low sale price on in-stock goods. Plus, huge discounts on special orders from Lazy Boys, Smith Brothers, Hollywood, Berlin Gardens, and Lift Chairs. We guarantee the best price, the best service, and free delivery only at Thompson Furniture and Mattress in Columbus.
Your home is your sanctuary. Get the peace of mind you deserve with a free estimate on a Generac automatic standby generator for your home from Generator Supercenter, the nation's #1 Generac generator dealer. With expert installation and 24-hour monitoring, Generator Supercenter won't leave you in the dark. Financing is available. Take control of your power today with Generator Supercenter. Call 317-827-0808. Generator Supercenter of Indianapolis, 317-827-0808.
Hey, John, why so glum?
I just got let go. The company's downsizing. This is the third time in the last 2 years. I'm done with this.
Have you thought about My Computer Career? I've heard they can train you for a career in IT in just a few months, including cybersecurity and the basics of AI. And you don't need prior training or experience. Now that's a recession-resistant career.
Wow, thanks. I'll check them out.
Go to mycomputercareer.edu and take the free career evaluation. mycomputercareer.edu. Financial aid is available for qualified students, including the GI Bill.
Smokey the Bear. Then you know why Smokey tells you when he sees you passing through. Remember, please be careful, it's the least that you can do.
What you desire, don't play with matches, don't play with fire.
After 80 years of learning his wildfire prevention tips, Smokey Bear lives within us all. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com. And remember,
only you can prevent wildfires.
Brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
You want to listen all day to WIBC, but you don't always have time. Don't worry. There's a podcast for that. The WIBC Mashup. Daily highlights from your favorite hosts, Tony Katz, Kendall and Casey, and Hammer and Nigel. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Your rights, your responsibilities, your guns. This is The Gun Guy with Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back. I'm Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. So text, history, and tradition. We talked about text. It's what the hell does the amendment mean? What's it protect? What's the scope of its protection? And then you look at history and tradition, and those are directly related. They really look at how, at the time of the founding and the time of the ratification of the Second Amendment, which is 1791, how were Second Amendment rights regulated? And the idea is that if there were laws in place that were accepted generally in the country, then the people voting to ratify the Second Amendment would understand that those were the kinds of laws that would, in fact, survive, even though they're ratifying the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment. And so if a law is consistent with the history and tradition of how the Second Amendment has been regulated in this country, going back to the time of the founding, then that's going to be upheld, even if it is a law being examined that bears on the right being protected. And that was the test adopted in Bruen. And in the Fifth Circuit, after the Bruen case came out, they reconsidered the case and said, under text, history, and tradition, this law that says you can't possess a firearm if you have a domestic violence order of protection doesn't survive because there was no similar law. There was no analog, is the word you see in the cases. There was no analog. There was no similar law at the time of the founding. And by the way, there's some discussion in Bruen by some of the justices also talking about looking to the time the 14th Amendment was ratified, which is 1868, because the 14th Amendment is what made the Bill of Rights applicable to the states and prevented the states from infringing those same rights. For instance, the First Amendment talks about Congress shall make no law. Well, it's talking about Congress. Does that mean the Indiana legislature can pass laws that infringe on your First Amendment rights? Well, the answer to that is no, they cannot, but that's specifically because of the 14th Amendment that made the protections of the Bill of Rights, those rights that were incorporated, quote unquote. And sometimes it takes a judicial decision to say, yeah, this amendment should be incorporated so that it's applicable to the states. And I could bore you to death on the law of incorporation. But that's what the McDonald case in 2010 that followed the Heller decision, that came out and said, yeah, the Second Amendment is in fact incorporated and therefore applicable to the states and protects people against state regulation. Even though the Heller case was actually referencing a federal law in place in the Federal District of Columbia. But there's some discussion in the Bruen case. We should also look to the time of the ratification of the 14th Amendment, 1868. But there needs to be an analog. There needs to be a historical analog. And if there's not, then the law, the statute, is unconstitutional. And they found, therefore, the protective order statute was unconstitutional. So what changed yesterday? That's what we'll get into when we come back here after the top of the hour. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Summer storm season is in full swing here in Indiana. The rain, the wind, the madness of it all. When the next storm hits and causes wind and hail damage, there's no need to worry. Moss Roofing, M-O-S-S, mossroofing.com is here to help with all your roofing and siding repairs every single time. See, they did the joke again. I love that. Moss Roofing offers free inspections and expertly guides customers through the often frustrating insurance process to ensure the best experience possible. That's why Moss Roofing is your trusted Indianapolis roofing and siding contractor. Talk to Moss Roofing today. 317-747-3665. Tell them Tony Cat sent you. 317-747-3665. Your roofing and siding professional is just one phone call away. Moss Roofing, 747-3665 or online at Moss, M-O-S-S, mossroofing.com.
From marshmallow festivals to fireworks on the shore. No matter where you're headed this summer, Hubler's got you covered for 100,000 miles. During Hubler's Freedom to Drive, shop any of our 12 locations and choose from Chevys, Fords, GMCs, Buicks, Nissans, Acuras, Mazdas, Hondas, and many more. Over 2,000 vehicles. All makes, all models, certified vehicles, luxury vehicles, even the hard-to-find ones. Plus, every Hubler Q-certified vehicle is covered by a 128-point vehicle inspection and a free Carfax history report.
'Cause Hubler's got you covered.
No matter where you're headed this summer, Hubler's got you covered for 100,000 miles. During our Freedom to Drive, visit drivehubler.com or any of our 12 locations.
Cover me!
Warranty on select models less than 9 years old.
Technology Recyclers is Indiana's best choice for computer and electronics recycling. A Hoosier veteran-owned company, Technology Recyclers is R2, Rios, and NAID certified, 100% landfill-free, and always guaretees complete data destruction. And you can expect free business pickups anywhere in Indiana at tech-recyclers.com or call 1-800-237-3887. Technology Recyclers, the official sponsors of tomorrow. That's tech-recyclers.com for a stress-free experience in recycling.
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Broadcasting from the Technology Recycler Studios, this is Indy's Mobile News, 93 WIBC, WIBC HD1 Indianapolis. The news starts now.
Via satellite, social media, and on the radio. It's in our name, Radio America.
Hannah complained of a headache. It was a rhabdomyosarcoma. Within a few days, Hannah was in treatment because we were told that the tumor was very aggressive. And it very quickly became clear that St. Jude was the ultimate place to be. So we've essentially put our lives in South Africa on hold. Incredibly blessed to be here. St. Jude is an asset to the world. The research that is developed here is offered freely to the rest of the medical world. The entire way that the place operates is just to give and to care. I think it's the kind of place that not only stands as a beacon for pediatric cancer, but I think it could teach the world a couple of lessons about how to treat people. And I think if those lessons could be learned even in their most basic form, this world could be a better place.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
It's hard to keep track of all the health information that comes your way, but you still want to make the right decisions. Here's an easy one. Get tested for hepatitis C. It's a leading cause of liver cancer and often has no symptoms. People born from 1945 to 1965 are 5 times more likely to have hepatitis C. The good news is that now it can be cured. Talk with your doctor about getting a blood test for hepatitis C. Know for sure. A message from the CDC.
Your one blood donation can help save the lives of up to 3 people. Give blood through the American Red Cross to help hospital patients. Visit redcrossblood.org today.
When you're high, you feel different. But if you feel different, you drive different. So don't drive high. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Please, don't waste your small talk. Donate it to foster care.
We're here early before they wake up.
Kids in foster care.
We stay late. We stay informed. We invest in the latest technology.
Brought to you by Foster More.
Life is full of balance, but if you are one of the millions of people affected by dizziness, vertigo, and imbalance, finding your footing isn't as easy as it seems. These conditions disrupt daily life and rob people of their independence. They are often misdiagnosed by healthcare providers, and some people are told that their symptoms are all in their head or that they are just due to stress. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Do you often feel dizzy and foggy-headed? Do you reach out for the wall to keep yourself from falling over? Do you experience a constant ringing in your ears? If you answered yes, you might have a problem with your inner ear. But there's hope. Visit liferebalanced.org or call 800-837-8428 to learn how you can get better. Again, that's 800-837-8428. Sponsored by the Vestibular Disorders Association.
I'm Steve Keeker, president of Senior Care Consulting. For those of you working in the business of senior care, I have an amazing opportunity for you. If you have ever thought about owning your own business, this is for you. If you're a nursing home administrator, assisted living executive director, sales and marketing representative, director of nursing, or director of social services, this is what we do. We help our clients find the right senior care community. We're not another run-of-the-mill free referral service. We're very different. We offer a placement service with integrity. We're currently offering special incentives for the first 5 franchise owners. I call it the Founders Club. Take advantage of this amazing incentive and opportunity. For more information about owning your own senior care consulting franchise, call 833-722-3726. 833-722-3726 or visit seniorcareconsulting.com.
Hey y'all, I'm Blake Shelton. Being from Oklahoma, I know a thing or two about natural disasters. Tornadoes are common where I'm from and have affected my life and the lives of people I care about. No matter where you live, be aware of the dangers in your area and have a plan. You can create an emergency kit, come up with an evacuation plan, and know where to seek shelter. You never know when a disaster may hit. These simple steps can help save a life. This message is brought to you by the U.S. Air Force.
In the community working together to create a brighter future. Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Visit liveunited.org to learn how you can help.
Your Indiana adventure is near. Come to Grant County this year.
Cruise over to Fairmont, Indiana, Saturday, June 29th for the James Dean Spring Run Car Show. Hundreds of street rods, American classics, incredible muscle cars take over James Dean's hometown, celebrating his classic, cool spirit. Get details at showmegrantcounty.com. Grant County, Indiana, classic, cool.
Your Indiana adventure is near. Come to Grant County this year.
We all have someone we love, like the favorite lyric in our favorite song. You can't imagine life without them. Cancer screening tests can help keep the person you love around longer by detecting changes before cancer develops, or catch it early when it may be easier to treat. And many tests are available for free or are covered by insurance. It's time to sound like a broken record. Tell all your friends and family, I love you. Get screened. Visit cancer.org/getscreened to learn more.
The July 4th sale is on at Sundown Gardens in Westfield. 20% off trees and shrubs through July 3rd. 186th Street and Spring Mill Road, sundowngardens.com.
No Kid Hungry is providing healthy meals and hope to hungry kids so they can build better futures. Learn more at helpnokidhungry.org.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is the Second Amendment, and this is the Gun Guy.
Boom, 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 boom. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, 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 boom. Bang, bang, bang.
With Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back for hour number 2 of the Gun Guy Show here on 93 WIBC. We're glad you're with us. Glad you stuck around for hour number 2. Or if you're just joining us, we're doing a bit of a deep dive on this Rahimi decision that just came out of the Supreme Court. A lot of discussion, a lot of hand-waving, and a lot of confusion, frankly, on what the decision means and what it doesn't mean, what it says and what it doesn't say. And listen, make no mistake, it is to some degree a step back on 2A rights. You know, how much of a step back, we're going to have to see how it's interpreted. But I think that liberal courts certainly are going to use it to find more laws. And it doesn't even have to be liberal courts. I think courts generally will find more laws constitutional because of this decision. Well, why is that? And I'm talking about gun control laws specifically. Because in the text, history, and tradition test, where you look for analogs, similar laws that were in place at the time of the founding, and to some degree you can even go back and look historically before the time of the founding in terms of laws even from England that to a large degree our laws are based upon. Although there's a great discussion, I believe it's in Gorsuch's concurring opinion, it says, well, don't to put too much stock in looking at some of the laws of England, because frankly the Bill of Rights to a large degree was passed to get away from some of the onerous laws in England that the founders fought a war to get out from underneath. And so listen, to the extent that we base our laws on some laws from England, okay, that's an appropriate reference. But don't get too carried away on that, since, you know, the Declaration of Independence, for instance, is set out with the grievances against King George, and a lot of them are based on laws imposed by England at the time. So looking to them as historical analogs for the determination of the constitutionality of our laws is a bit misplaced. And it was a fantastic point. But text, history, and tradition. So you're looking for historical analogs, particularly in place in the United States or in the states at the time of the ratification, 1791. And if you can't find historical analogs, then the statute at issue fails the text, history, and tradition test. And so the Fifth Circuit, in looking at the Rahimi case, said, you know what, we can't find any such law. We can't find a law that says, that you can get a domestic violence order of protection and therefore someone loses their gun rights, their Second Amendment rights, their right to keep and bear arms. Therefore, it's unconstitutional. It fails text, history, and tradition. So the case then goes up to the Supreme Court. The government appealed it. That's why it's U.S. versus Rahimi rather than Rahimi versus U.S. The first person listed is the appellant, the person looking to change the result of the courts below, and the immediate court below anyway. And so the government takes it up and says the Fifth Circuit was wrong to say that this law doesn't pass text, history, and tradition because those judges of the Fifth Circuit couldn't find historical analogs for this kind of a law. And listen, as soon as the case went up and a lot of us started reading the facts on this case, and specifically reading about Rahimi himself and the underlying proceedings, because Rahimi consented to a lot of what happened to him. He consented to the protective order being issued. He took a plea on the actual crime he was alleged to have committed, which is possessing a firearm after he was a prohibited possessor because of the domestic violence order of protection. So he rolled over on a number of issues, and it is difficult to appeal having rolled over on a number of issues, and you waive a lot of arguments you could have otherwise had. For instance, if he'd have gone in there and fought the protective order and even said, not only do I want a hearing, but I want to be represented by counsel. And we'll get more into this later in the show. I can't afford a lawyer. I need to have a lawyer. I want to have a lawyer before I lose my rights. And the judge, in all likelihood, in that proceeding would have said, well, I'm sorry, sir, this is a civil proceeding. It's not a criminal proceeding. The right to counsel doesn't apply in a civil case. Therefore, you have no constitutional right to counsel. If you can't afford a lawyer, you just don't get a lawyer. That would raise huge due process issues because you're talking about the loss of a Second Amendment right. If he hadn't consented to the order and had fought it, the burden of proof to get an order issued against you under these proceedings is just preponderance of the evidence. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt like in a criminal case. Or even like in Indiana's red flag law, it's kind of an intermediate standard between beyond a reasonable doubt and preponderance of the evidence. It's called clear and convincing evidence. In this proceeding, under this law, the protective order was issued against Rahimi under. It's just preponderance of the evidence with no right to counsel. And oh, by the way, there are a lot of resources out there for people wanting a protective order and saying they've been the victim of domestic violence. A lot of times those people can have lawyers appointed for them. There are a lot of services out there available, as there should be. Domestic violence, make no mistake on my position on this, domestic violence is a huge issue in this country. It's a huge problem in this country. My mother's been the victim of domestic violence, not from my father. They were long since divorced when this happened to my mother, but very, very significant. And she was hurt badly. And so it's been an issue that's impacted my family. So I am not minimizing the problem around domestic violence, but the point here is that a lot of times there are more resources available to the person seeking the protective order, and there's even legal services dedicated to this in a lot of places across this country, where those same legal services and the availability and assistance of counsel for people who can't afford it, for the people who might be fighting a protective order, they don't have a lot of those same resources. So is right to counsel part of due process protection? You bet. Is the burden of proof relative to, like in a criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that a due process protection when you're talking about the loss of liberty and incarceration? Yeah, sure it is. So to lose a constitutional right when you have no right to counsel and you have the mere preponderance of the evidence standard that has to be met for the protective order to be issued against you and therefore to lose a constitutional freedom. Had Rahimi gone in and fought this and requested counsel, then you would have definitely seen due process questions and issues being raised before the Supreme Court, but none of that happened because those weren't preserved in the trial court. So that's where we ended up. So what did the Supreme Court do with it? Well, what a lot of us predicted, and I've said it on the Hammer Nigel show on Monday Gun Day, I've said it here on my show, is Rahimi's a very bad guy based on the record in the litigation that was established. He was very abusive toward the woman who got the protective order against him. At one point, he was shoving her into a car, smacked her head against the car as he was pushing her in the door of the car. A passerby saw all this happening, and Rahimi then fires a shot. It's unclear whether, and by the way, the woman, once Rahimi is distracted that he was abusing, runs away. Rahimi then fires a shot. He's right out in public, I believe in a parking lot, and fires a shot. It was unclear whether he was shooting at a witness or shooting at the person he was abusing. There's another story where he went through a neighborhood and was just randomly shooting shots out of the window. There was another report that he was in a restaurant and he was with a friend, and the friend's credit card gets declined, and Rahimi pulls out a gun and shoots his gun off into the ceiling. Simply upset because his friend's credit card was declined, and he's firing a gun in public. And a lot of us looked at this and said, listen, justice is supposed to be blind, right? That's why all the statues you see of Lady Justice with the scales, whatnot, she always has a blindfold on. And the idea is that the law and justice ought to be blind to the people before them, and they ought to consider the law and the legal issues before them while blind to those issues that might otherwise sway them, like the individual characteristics of the litigants before them. And I got lectured on this when I said, well, Rahimi's a very bad guy, and I think the court's going to find a way to uphold this law because they're not going to be inclined to reach a decision that's going to return gun rights to Rahimi and people like Rahimi. He is not a good representative for Second Amendment rights before the United States Supreme Court. And people keep on saying, oh, guy, don't you understand justice is blind and the Supreme Court will never look to those issues. Well, that issue became very clear very quickly when you started reading the Rahimi decision, because about the first 4 or 5 pages are all about what a bad guy Rahimi is, and going through all the facts I just did and more about what a scumbag and how violent this guy is. And a lot of times you know exactly where a court's going to go by how they start a decision. And here they were talking about what a dirtbag Rahimi, how violent he is, what a credible threat he was to the woman who obtained the protective order against him. And so a lot of us said, listen, they're going to find a way to uphold this against Rahimi. What they do in the process that's going to affect other cases down the road is the broader question. Well, what did they do? How did they get past text, history, and tradition? When the Fifth Circuit said, hey, look, there's no historical analog. That means it fails text, history, and tradition. How did the Supreme Court, 8 justices, it's an 8-1 decision. How did 8 justices decide that this law does pass text, history, and tradition, and how can that influence other courts down the road looking at other laws? For instance, what does this do? What effect might it have on Hunter Biden's case going up? That becomes interesting. I'll get into all that and more when we come back. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
It's another week of this.
Trump guilty verdict. Unclear if Trump's status on Indiana's ballot will be challenged.
And another day for this.
Dark day for our country.
Plus, another possibility of this.
Hunter Biden charged with 3 felony counts of lying.
That's why Another update is coming up at the top and bottom of the hour.
Here's what's happening in the real world.
Just another day. Not with all this happening every day.
We take another historic step.
93.
To stay informed.
WIPC.
Guy Relford for Tactical Firearms Training. Our most popular class is Essentials of Indiana Gun Law. We've got one of those coming up Saturday, August 17th at Indy Arms Company. They're at 2550 East 55th Street in Indy. It's $50 for an individual, $95 for couples. This is 4.5 to 5 hours of the most important legal information you need as an Indiana gun owner. You can check that out and register right online at tactical-firearms.com. Just click on upcoming courses at tactical-firearms.com.
Hey guys, it's Rob from my friends at Universal Windows Direct. Spring is here and it's only going to get hotter. Call my guys at Universal Windows Direct. At Universal Windows Direct, their super spacer technology makes their windows last up to 5 times longer than other Windows systems. So your windows from Universal Windows Direct perform better and last longer. Plus, Universal Windows Direct backs it up with a true 20-year warranty. And listen to this deal going on with Universal Windows Direct. Call today at 317-659-7574, and for every 2 windows you buy, you get the next 2 free. Buy 2, get 2. Buy 4, get 4. Buy 20, get 20. There's no limit. Plus, what a deal, 0% financing for 60 months. That's right, 0% financing for 60 months. Restrictions apply. For the last windows you'll ever need, go to UWD.com, UWD.com, UWD.com.
I've been asked 1,000 times, did you plan on becoming the largest injury law firm in the world? And the answer is no. When I started, there were just 2 of us. Today, Morgan & Morgan has almost 800 lawyers alone. No injury firm in the country has anywhere close to that. We set out to be focused on our clients and to have a commitment to trying cases and winning. And when you have those results at trial, you're able to settle most of your cases quickly and fairly. Reputation matters. We grew like this because we worked hard and so many former clients referred family and friends. And what I believe is the main reason is we delivered for our clients a lot. Hard work and client satisfaction was our plan. It worked. Hope is not a plan. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
You expect your home to protect everything you love, but you don't expect the ways water is breaking down your crawl space and damaging your home. Musty smells, sagging floors, mold are just a few signs your crawl space is compromised. But there's one way to get answers to all your concerns. A free home inspection from Indiana Foundation Service. We put water back in its place. Get your free inspection at indianafoundation.com.
Community Health Network cares for your heart health. From heart scans and vascular screenings to complex heart procedures, you can count on our expert team for the highest quality cardiovascular care, when and where you need it. Your path to a healthy heart starts with knowing your risk. Schedule a heart scan or vascular screening today. Visit ecommunity.com/heart. Community Health Network. Exceptional care. Simply delivered.
Morning people wake up for peace and quiet. McDonald's breakfast people, we wake up for the sweet rush of getting that warm, delicious breakfast right before it ends.
Be a McDonald's breakfast person with your morning favorites. Grab a classic like the juicy steak, egg, and cheese bagel, melty sausage, egg, and cheese McGriddles, or savory sausage McMuffin with egg. With all that warm and toasty deliciousness, your day is looking up. At participating McDonald's.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Pierce Jewelers is the best family-owned jewelry store in Carmel. All jewelry and watch repair, appraisals, and custom design are done in-house. Shop local, shop smart, shop Pierce Jewelers.
There are screening tests to catch cancer early. Visit cancer.org/getscreened.
Now you've got a gun guy. Guy Relford on 93 WIPC.
And welcome back. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. So, Rahimi, what does it mean? What does it not mean? Again, the test applied by the court was the one adopted in the Bruen decision, text, history, and tradition. And while there were certainly arguments being made both by the government and by some of the liberal justices, including in the dissenting opinions, or actually, concurring opinions from Justices Sotomayor and Jackson, that the court should go back to this essentially different tiers of analysis and different levels of scrutiny and balancing the interests of the government against the degree of infringement, that test being used to uphold gun control laws all over the country. There was a push for the court to back away from Bruen and back away from text, history, and tradition. That didn't happen, and that's a very good thing. At the same time, they found the law to be constitutional under text, history, and tradition when there were no specific historical analogs to the law in question. There were no specific examples at the time of the founding or even looking at the time of the ratification of the 14th Amendment. And so how did they get past text, history, and tradition? Well, they said, listen, you don't have to get too specific when looking for the historical analogs we're talking about here. We didn't mean in Bruen that you had to find the exact same law or something that is so closely analogous to make it obvious it's the same issue, the same law. It just has to be relatively similar in terms of, and this is very important terminology, and a lot of people discussing this case and not understanding the impact this case is going to have. A lot of people saying it's got a really very narrow application because the holding is just this. And Justice Roberts lays this out. Chief Justice Roberts lays this out early on. We hold only, he's making very specific point that the ruling is narrow. We hold only that where a court determines that a credible threat, that a person constitutes a credible threat to another person, that person may be temporarily disarmed without violating the Second Amendment. So where a person presents a credible threat to another person after having been found by a court to be that credible threat, they can be temporarily disarmed without violation of the Second Amendment. A lot of people looked at that and said, all right, well, this only applies to violent criminals, to people as bad as Rahimi. Well, if that was all they said and left it at that, and they didn't go into this discussion and analysis of the test and how the text, history, and tradition test ought to be applied, that might be true. But the impact's going to be much broader than people who don't appreciate this next point really understand. And that's because the analysis now is not that you have to find specific analogs. You simply look at the principles underlying the laws in place, for instance, at the time of the founding and the ratification of the Second Amendment. You look at the principles underlying the laws in place at the time, and that will determine whether text, history, and tradition, and that test is met or not, whether the law being challenged is consistent with those same principles. That's a much broader test. It's a much broader test in the sense that more laws will unquestionably be found to be constitutional applying that test. You don't need to find specific analogs. You just look at analogs that simply have the same principles underlying them. That's a change. That's backing up from Bruen to a significant degree. Because look at the laws they used in the case. In Rahimi itself, they said, well, we have laws based on the same principle of keeping guns away from violent people. And they looked at two specific kinds of laws that were generally accepted at the time the Second Amendment was ratified. And the first were surety laws. You're thinking, surety? Well, what do bonds and whatnot have to do with this? Well, if you were determined, and there were laws like this in several different states at the time of the ratification of the Second Amendment. If you were found to be a threat to another person, and by the way, this was available to, for instance, a woman who was being abused by her husband. You could go to a court, and a court could impose a surety obligation, essentially where a person has to post a bond could be cash, could be some other form of surety, has to post a bond that says if they then committed the act they were being prohibited from committing, like for instance, say a woman's being abused by her husband. So she goes to a court and she goes, this guy's abusing me and it needs to stop. And the court says, okay, you know what? We've looked at this and we agree with you. We've taken evidence, and this person now has to post a bond of X amount of dollars. And if he then abuses you after that, he forfeits the amount of the bond, the surety. And that'll cost him a bunch of money, and that'll prevent him from being violent against you. And these surety laws were in place. People had been fighting in public or threatening other people. They could have a surety imposed against them. And so they go, there you go. There's a law that prevents violence, generally speaking. And that's the same principle underlying the Domestic Violence Order Protection Law. And then looked at what they called affraying. Affraying. Haven't heard that term before? Well, there were affraying laws where basically if you went about in public, particularly if you're in public and riding through public, and you're generally terrorizing the public, particularly with dangerous and unusual weapons, to the torment and terror of the public at large, then you violated the affraying laws and be punished for that and be disarmed in the process. And they said, there you go. Here's are people that are terrorizing the public. And so, and what are we doing? We're taking guns away or weapons away, whatever these dangerous and unusual weapons are they're talking about. And that's consistent with the law we're talking about. And listen, in Clarence Thomas's dissenting opinion, he goes on and on and on about how completely different these laws are. Because, by the way, when you had your surety entered against, this surety obligation entered against you by a court, you didn't lose your ability to possess firearms. And the affraying laws were after you're doing something that's against the law and you're violating that law, that violation of the law can be used to disarm you. Much different than simply being found to be subject to a protective order. Having a protective order entered against you that prevents you up front from doing something in the future like hurting an intimate partner. So here you're being punished for a criminal act that's much different than being enjoined, essentially, from doing something in the future and losing your Second Amendment rights in the process. But the majority opinion, 8 justices, I should say, found that, you know what, these historical analogs, the same principle underlying those statutes, that same principles underlie the law at issue in the Rahimi case. So how can this issue, where we don't have to find specific analogs, we just have to look at the general principle underlying historical analogs, and if those principles are the same with current laws, the current law meets text, history, and tradition. How does that, for instance? People say, this only applies to violent criminals. Really? Well, how could that analysis, where we don't have to find specific historical analogs, we just have to look at the principles underlying them, how can that be used by the government to find the law in question after Hunter Biden's conviction, find that law to be constitutional? That's a great example. It has nothing to do with even gun rights. But if we're going to look now for principles underlying these historical analogs rather than specifically similar laws, that's a game changer. And if a liberal court's inclined to find a law constitutional, I'll guarantee you they're going to use this principles underlying standard to find many more laws constitutional. That's a big deal. I'm not waving my hands in the air. I'm not an alarmist. And we'll have to see how it's applied. But that's a big deal that a lot of people aren't understanding. Right now we're taking a break. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
However you're getting around these days.
So when you buy an electric vehicle, you can go all the way across America on a single tank of gas.
Oh, wait, what?
You plug it in.
Plug in. Mornings and afternoons for Matt Bear traffic.
To be on time.
Eastbound 465 from Keystone Avenue.
That's what this will do that.
Fuel up on the latest information.
Closure of Allisonville Road to eastbound 4.
We never run out of juice.
We'll help getting around.
On 93 WIBC.
If you're looking for a deal that cannot be beat, get over to the friendliest folks you'll ever meet. Hey, it rhymed. Andy Moore Ford. The commercial truck center is currently undergoing big changes, which means bigger and better things for you coming soon. Stop by today, right there on Main Street in Plainfield, and get more savings, more selection, and more for your trade only at Andy Moore Ford. You're going to love it, and you'll see why other drivers love it too. You're ready to go electric vehicle? Andy Moore Ford is the EV headquarters. Check out the Mustang Mach-E, the E-Transit, and that F-150 Lightning, all in stock with more arriving daily. And say hello to more rebates, federal and state incentives. You could save more on your EV purchase. Plus, with updated federal regulations, you can claim up to $7,500 instantly on site. We're talking about saving more with Andy Moore Ford. Your next car, your next truck. Talk to them about service as well and your electric vehicle. 2713 East Main Street in Plainfield or online at Andy Moore, M-O-H-R. AndyMooreFord.com.
Gilbert worked in retail and restaurant management for 14 years. It was time for a change.
I recognized where I was at was vulnerable to the whims of the economy.
Then he heard about My Computer Career. Gilbert went for it.
In as little as 7 months, I got all of my certifications at a fraction of a cost for college.
He became an IT pro in just months with zero experience at mycomputercareer.edu.
I can work from anywhere. I have more time for my family as well.
It's not rocket science. It's mycomputercareer.edu.
This is one student's experience. Individual results vary.
Nameless Catering celebrates 10 years of business this summer. A lean beginning with just $500 in startup cash and a 200 square foot kitchen in Fountain Square, Nameless Catering has grown to be one of the biggest and best caterers in Indiana, serving weddings and events from 30 guests and on up to 30,000. Nameless Catering can handle it all. Reliability, great communication, and exceptional food keep Hoosiers coming back again and again. Check out namelesscatering.com.
This hour on WIBC is powered by Pierce Jewelers, designers of fine custom jewelry.
Fox News, I'm Ann Carrick. Former President Trump speaking today at the Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference in Washington, D.C.
We will win the presidency, and I'll have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine, which would have never happened if I were president. I will restore that. Now, I'll have that settled.
Previously, Trump said he'd end the Russian invasion on day one. Ukraine's president called the rhetoric very dangerous. Ben Pericone of AAA Mid-Atlantic has a warning about heat waves and hot cars.
The inside of your car will heat up incredibly. It is not uncommon for the inside of a car, especially darker interiors, to go upwards of 120 to 130 degrees.
America is listening to Fox News.
From marshmallow festivals to fireworks on the shore, no matter where you're headed this summer, Hubler's got you covered for 100,000 miles. During Hubler's Freedom to Drive, shop any of our 12 locations and choose from Chevys, Fords, GMCs, Buicks, Nissans, Acuras, Mazdas, Hondas, and many more. Over 2,000 vehicles. All makes, all models, certified vehicles, luxury vehicles, even the hard-to-find ones. Plus, every Hubler Q-certified vehicle is covered by a 128-point vehicle inspection and a free Carfax history report.
'Cause Hubler's got you covered.
No matter where you're headed this summer, Hubler's got you covered for 100,000 miles. During our Freedom to Drive, visit drivehubler.com or any of our 12 locations.
Cover me!
Warranty on select models less than 9 years old.
Nobody cares for you like family. Family Heating and Air.
Hi, this is Malia with Family Heating and Air, and as a mom myself, I know it's really important to keep the kiddos healthy. Air quality, humidity, those are super big issues on my concern list. If you share any of these concerns, give Family a call, 317-577-8077.
Family Heating and Air is your trusted local independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
My husband, Bob, has Parkinson's, and he needs more help now, and I need more support to help him. Thanks to Indiana Pathways for Aging, we're getting the support we need to help him right here at home, like with meal prep and basic personal care, and even respite support for me.
Pathways provides Hoosier Medicaid members, age 60 and over, support for care their way, so they can live life their way. To learn more, eligible members call 87 Pathway 4 or visit in.gov/pathways.
He's a Second Amendment attorney. He's an NRA certified firearms instructor. He's the gun guy. Guy Relford on 93 WIPC.
And welcome back. I'm Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. And listen, we're spending pretty much the whole show on this Rahimi case, but it's a big deal. It's the most impactful Supreme Court case we've had, which means case we've had, since the Bruen decision. And it's going to change how laws are interpreted going forward. And listen, you see an awful lot of discussion, a lot of commentary on social media and elsewhere. A lot of people come on there, a lot of gun owners on there, a lot of people who care deeply about their Second Amendment rights. And I'm sure a lot of listeners of the Gun Guy Show will come on there and you'll see the comments, for instance, all gun control laws are unconstitutional. And what part of shall not be infringed don't people understand? And it's an understandable point because the Second Amendment's written in absolute terms. But every decision you ever see on the Second Amendment, even including Heller, written by Antonin Scalia, a fabulous judge who in that opinion did more for the Second Amendment than and again, the other four justices that voted with him did more for the Second Amendment than had ever been done before by the Supreme Court or any other court, because they clarified and established that there is an individual right protected by the Second Amendment, not created by the Second Amendment. Our rights don't come from the government. They don't come from the courts. They come from God. But the Second Amendment was intended by the founders to protect that law, protect it from infringement. And even in doing that, what did Justice Scalia say right there in the Heller decision? Like all constitutional rights, the right to keep and bear arms is not absolute. And some limitations are appropriate. And he talked about long-standing prohibitions like preventing felons and the mentally ill from possessing firearms. And his decision was not meant to cast doubt on those long-standing regulations, those long-standing laws. So that's right in the decision. So listen, you and I may say, or we may go out on the internet and tout, all gun control is unconstitutional, and I don't understand why these all aren't overturned. Well, it's because the Supreme Court has specifically said there are some laws that are allowable under the Second Amendment, even to the extent they impact on Second Amendment rights, like the prohibition against mentally ill people possessing firearms. And so a law is unconstitutional once a court says it is. You or I going out on social media talking about how unconstitutional a law is. A lot of people want to say the red flag laws are all unconstitutional. Listen, I've taken that issue to the Indiana Court of Appeals. In a 2-1 decision, they disagreed with me. But I argued passionately and with great conviction that our red flag law, as written at the time, was unconstitutional. And I still believe I'm right. But laws aren't unconstitutional until a court says they are. And there are a lot of people sitting in prison right now for having violated laws that you or I might say are unconstitutional. And it didn't do them a whole hell of a lot of good because they didn't get a court to agree with them. And there are going to be more people sitting in jail, and convictions are going to be upheld because of the interpretation of the text, history and tradition test coming out of the Bruen case. And that's this idea that simply the concepts, the principles underlying a law are what you look at for historical analogs. You don't have to find a specific example of the same kind of law. That's much broader. And let's look at Hunter Biden. Is that a Second Amendment issue? Yes. It says you can't possess a firearm if you are a user of or addicted to illegal firearms. And because that's the law, you're asked that question on the form when you're buying a gun, the 4473 form, are you a user of or addicted to illegal drugs? And now it even goes on and has a notation on there that say this includes marijuana in those states where marijuana has been legalized at the state level. Why? Because marijuana is still illegal at the federal level. So under federal law, if you're a user of, quote unquote, addicted to, I don't know that people get addicted to marijuana, physically anyway. And so I think it's completely silly as it relates to marijuana, but it still applies. And so the question says, are you a user of or addicted to eating illegal drugs? And if you answer yes on that question, you don't get your gun because you're a prohibited possessor. If you answer no and you're lying, that's a violation of federal law. They'll get you 10 years in prison. And there's a separate charge of providing false information to a federal firearms licensee, which is the gun shop, to obtain a firearm and giving them false information that's going to be maintained in records, which the FFL is required to keep under federal law. So it's the exact same act. It's checking no when you should have checked yes. It'll get you 15 years, 10 years on one charge, 5 on the other. And then the mere possession of the gun by someone who's a user of or addicted to illegal drugs is also illegal. So that's why Hunter's looking potentially, when he's sentenced, at 25 years. Now, he's not going to get anything close to that. He may get no jail time at all. He may get what they call in the federal system supervised home release, which is essentially house arrest, home detention, as we call it in the state system. But whatever he gets, he's looking at a potentially much longer sentence. And why is that? Because those things are each illegal. So he argued broadly, just like Rahimi did in the Supreme Court, that the law in question there about being user of or addicted to illegal drugs makes you a prohibited possessor. Hunter argued that was unconstitutional on its face. It was a facial challenge. And because there were no similar laws, and the judge declined that. And if you make a facial challenge, as Rahimi did, the court has to find that under no application of the law could it be constitutional. That's a much harder row to hoe than saying it's unconstitutional as applied to me, based on the specifics of your case. So during the trial court proceedings in the Hunter Biden case, the government and the defense team had a fight over whether the government had to prove that Hunter Biden used drugs or was intoxicated on drugs on the day he bought the gun. And the judge ruled, no, that's not required by the statute. You just have to have been a user of or addicted to in the general time frame. And that's good enough. If the jury finds that, then you're guilty of the crime. That sets up an argument by Hunter on appeal that as applied to him, because of that ruling by the judge specifically, the law is unconstitutional, because under the text, history, and tradition test, you may go back and find laws, for instance, that drunks, in fact, this is even mentioned in the Rahimi case, that drunks could be dispossessed of their firearms legally. The law is in place. You're intoxicated, we can take your guns away from you. And that's, I think, by logical extension, you can say you're intoxicated on drugs. We can take your guns away from you, which means we can make it illegal for you to possess guns. And therefore, had the judge said in order for Hunter to be guilty, he had to be high on drugs or had to use drugs on the day he bought the gun, there you got a historical analog. But since the judge said no, you just have to have used drugs in the general time frame, now it gets tougher to find historical analogs for that. It gets tougher to meet the text, history, and tradition test for Second Amendment cases that came out of Bruin. But I guarantee you, Hunter Biden's team and Hunter himself, if he understands the issue, are going to be very disappointed in the Rahimi case because don't the principles underlying the law is saying, well, if you're a drunk or you're drunk at the time, we can take your guns away from you. aren't the same principles. We don't want intoxicated people. We don't want people that are irresponsible because of substance abuse. Possessing firearms, isn't that the same principle underlying the law that Hunter was convicted under? Specifically, you can't be a user of or addicted to illegal drugs. Different historical analog. People actually intoxicated. The jury wasn't required to find that he was intoxicated on drugs at the time, and he could still be guilty. But isn't the same general principle applicable in both? That right there is a perfect example. If a court were to so rule, and I think it's very likely they would after the Rahimi decision, I'll show you how a law that might have been unconstitutional before the Rahimi case came out is going to be found to be constitutional because of looking at this principles underlying the historical analogs rather than specific on their face. Very similar laws that are analogous to the law being challenged. That's a big deal. All right, we're taking a break. We're a little past the 3/4 hour. We'll come back and wrap up this edition of the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
7 teenagers involved in a crash slammed into a home. Strong storms were moving through the area.
93 WIBC.
The right to use an abortion pill protected by the Supreme Court. No legal standing to challenge the Food and Drug Administration.
Another news update is minutes away.
We do have a double standard, and our system of justice is broken.
IU Health eliminating non-compete clauses for physicians practicing primary care.
93 WIBC Mobile News.
Guy Relford for Tactical Firearms Training. We'd love for you to come check out our Essentials of Indiana Gun Law class. If you'd like to know the most important legal information that you need as an Indiana gun owner, when you can use your gun, when you can point your gun, when you can use force, including deadly force in self-defense and the defense of others. How are the rules different in your home under our Castle Doctrine? What exactly is Indiana's so-called stand your ground law? What does it really mean? What does it justify, and what does it not? Those are all vitally important issues if you carry a gun, even if you own a gun in your home. And those are the exact kind of issues we cover in Essentials of Indiana Gun Law. It's 4.5 to 5 hours. The next one is going to be Saturday, August 17th, 9 a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. at Indy Arms on the northeast side of Indy. We'd love for you to come join us. It's $50 for an individual, $95 for couples. You can sign up right online at tactical-firearms.com. Just click on upcoming courses at tactical-firearms.com.
If you can plan barbecues and weddings, you can plan to protect yourself from a natural disaster. Sign up for local alerts, prepare an emergency kit, and make a family communications plan. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Hey, it's Rob. If you want to grow your hair back, check out the precision and accuracy of the Artis Robotic FUE at We Grow Hair Indy. You'll be amazed at the permanent natural results you can get and get back to work ASAP. Darren Andrews, Clinic Director of We Grow Hair Indy, is here to tell us more.
The Artis Robotic FUE hair transplant at We Grow Hair Indy, one of the most sophisticated hair transplant procedures available. The accuracy and the precision of the Artis Robotic FUE is what clients love the most. Get the results you want with our Artis FUE or multi-unit hair grafting procedure.
Don't wait. Call today and find out more about the Artis Robotic FUE at WeGrowHairIndy.com. Call 317-522-2995, 317-522-2995 for your evaluation, 317-522-2995, and grow your hair back today.
Everyone is talking about Galaxy Concrete Coatings and their transformation. Like your neighbor Dennis.
In the process of refinishing my garage and, trying to turn it into a man cave. So I started searching, online, and I ran across Galaxy.
Galaxy Concrete Coatings is not epoxy. It's better.
First thing I wanted to do initially is I wanted to repair where the concrete had eroded. They said they could do that. I said, well, heck, let me go ahead and get the entire floor covered.
Commercial or residential, 4 times stronger than epoxy, and it comes with a 15-year warranty.
They were so courteous and respectful of the home and the property. And when they're done, they cleaned up, picked up, swept up. It was like they were never there.
Click on GalaxyConcreteCoatings.com now. That's Galaxy Concrete Coatings. And remember to like us on Facebook. Galaxy Concrete Coatings. We're out of this world.
I would recommend Galaxy over any other competitor, hands down. You're going to be taken care of and you're going to be satisfied. These guys know what they're doing.
Will you be the one? This summer, Shepherd Community will spend hundreds of hours with 200 kids, learning, adventuring, and experiencing life-transforming relationships. Help us make a difference for one child. For just $28, you can impact a child for one day at Shepherd. One moment, one relationship can make a difference in the life of a child. You can be the one. Visit shepherdcommunity.org/be-the-one to give today. That's shepherdcommunity.org/be-the-one.
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Addiction. It's hard on those who struggle with it, but those who love the addict need support too. Matt Baer and Ryan Hedrick provide help and hope with Supporting Sobriety. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on WIBC.com. Second to none on the Second Amendment. This is The Gun Guy with Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back for what is, as typically, a bit of a short segment here to end the show. But the last thing I'm seeing a lot of commentary on with respect to the effects of the Rahimi case is that it is very much likely to support the constitutionality of red flag laws. And listen, in terms of red flag laws simply on their face violating the Second Amendment, I think that's an absolutely valid comment that the Rahimi decision supports red flag laws. I mean, look at again, Roberts summarized their holding as a person determined by a court to pose a credible threat to another person may be temporarily disarmed under the Second Amendment. Well, the government would tell you that that's exactly what a red flag law is. Now, it says credible threat to another person. Our red flag law says if you're an imminent risk of personal injury to yourself or others, then you're dangerous and therefore can have guns seized from you and become a prohibited possessor. It also says, and this is the part I've always had a problem with, it's better than it used to be, but it also says you're dangerous if it's probable that you will be a risk of personal injury to yourself or others in the future, probable that you will be. And then one of two additional things. Either you have a mental illness that's controlled by medication, but you don't reliably take your medication, or there's documented evidence which would give rise to a reasonable belief that you have a propensity for violent or suicidal conduct. So there is some argument that the second half of the definition of dangerous under Indiana statute, that you're not a present credible threat in the wording of the Rahimi decision, but it's just probable you will become one, and you meet one of these other two conditions. There is an argument that that falls short of what the Supreme Court says is constitutional. It doesn't mean that our statute's unconstitutional. It just means it's not, that part of the statute is not specifically protected by the Rahimi decision. But generally speaking, to the extent red flag laws are simply disarming people found by a court to pose a credible threat to another person, the Rahimi case directly supports them. Make no mistake about that. We're at the end of the show. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you come back. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
It's more important than ever to hire the right agent to sell your home to maximize its sales price. That's why I recommend Mark Dietl. Mark and his team have the plan and experience